Welcome back. Let's continue from our last video. Previously you saw Dane make the decision to venture out into the world. His father Count Sogres and his mother Lily Sogres eagerly took it upon themselves to teach him everything they knew about spear mastery and the art of assassination. Meanwhile, Dane couldn't help but think somewhat hypocritically just how lucky he was. The southern region of the Althean Empire Sogres territory with its warm climate and abundant natural resources was vital to the Althean Empire's resilience during the Long War. Thanks to the wise governance of Count Sogres, it remained peaceful and even the remnants of rebellion had been subdued. Finally, a sense of enduring peace had returned as though the age of war had never existed. Along one of the lively streets in the Sogres territory, two young women in their 20s walked side by side, engaged in animated conversation. One asked if her friend had heard the latest rumor, and the other curiously inquired what rumor it was. The first girl said they were saying young Master Dane had stopped by some shops recently. Her friend, surprised, asked if he really had. The first girl confirmed, adding that he had even bought something, and she had heard the shopkeeper's daughter had fainted when she saw him. Her friend exclaimed in disbelief that the stories were true. The first girl insisted they were totally true and that they said he was getting more handsome by the day. The other girl said dreamily that she wished she could see him just once and wondered if he had a betrothed yet. The girl in the purple dress began to fantasize, causing her friend to gape in shock and exclaim that she was crazy, and to snap out of it, reminding her that he was only 14. She watched in horror as her companion started drooling, thinking a budding child hunter was being born. In response to the teasing, the dreamer smirked mischievously and shared more juicy gossip, saying she had heard he didn't seem 14 at all, and people said he was already as tall as the Count. The other girl wondered if it could be because the Countess was tall too, musing about superior genes. The first girl bet people would think he was 20 just by looking at him, describing him with silver hair and blue eyes, saying her heart would stop if she ever saw him. As she spoke, her eyes began to gleam like car headlights, bright with unrestrained admiration, while the girl in the brown dress listened with growing excitement, a spark of anticipation appearing on her face. She declared that next time he visited she had to see him and wondered when he would go out again, adding that she had heard he visited that shop often. Oh, speaking of which, she continued, the forest warden had told her something else. Her friend asked if she was serious. The first girl affirmed, saying if they talked to the warden first it would be easier to spot him. Her friend exclaimed in disbelief if she was actually serious about this. The scene then shifted to the outskirts of Sogres territory in the depths of a mysterious pine forest brimming with ancient magic known ominously as the Forest of Doom. Dane was in the midst of completing an escape mission assigned by his mother. Cloaked in a dark green mantle and wielding his spear, he moved cautiously through the trees. Taking a small piece of cloth from his pouch, he held it in front of his face, letting it sway in the air to gauge the wind's direction. He muttered to himself that the wind was blowing southward and that he had seen cherry spiders in this area before, so he would head west. He tucked the cloth away and thought quickly that he had 3 hours to get out before sunset. With a determined breath, he sprang into action, bounding between tree branches, moving with the grace of a shadow. The first rule of an assassin, he thought, was to never let the enemy find you. Dane's task was to evade both nets and traps strategically placed by his mother and escape this perilous forest. Every step was a test of speed, precision, and instinct. Having just landed in a small clearing, Dane inhaled deeply, drawing in the magical air and mana that saturated his surroundings. He held the breath for a moment before exhaling slowly, allowing his aura to meld seamlessly with the forest energies. He sharpened his senses and soon spotted the hidden dangers lurking ahead. Invisible strands of thread, nearly undetectable to the naked eye, stretched across the clearing in a web of peril. One wrong move would trigger the trap. Touching even one strand would activate it instantly. He mused that it was simple but deadly, but fortunately this type of trap was easy enough to disable. Rolling up his sleeves, Dane prepared to dismantle the deadly mechanism, and sure as he approached the first wire. However, this was a trap set by Lady Lily, so there was no way he could resolve it so easily. At that moment, strange noises began to echo from above Dane's head, catching his attention. Only when he looked up did Dane realize that at some point atop the trees before him, there was a group of monstrous creatures that resembled giant chipmunks staring at him with ravenous eyes. Then one among them let out a screech and hurled itself straight toward Dane, its cry sounding like an alarm signal that immediately triggered the rest of the horde to charge at him as well, thirsting for a taste of his blood. Seeing the ferocity of these beasts, Dane instinctively took a few steps backward, thinking to himself that this was bad. It was a pack of Ruzelt, and he couldn't believe they were there. They were rushing at him with terrifying speed, and he knew he had to deal with them quickly. Just as he reached for his spear beside him to fight back, his movement suddenly froze. He thought that if he engaged them now and accidentally touched one of the traps, it would be even more dangerous. There was no other choice but to escape the area for the time being. With this thought, Dane abandoned any desire to fight the beasts and immediately grabbed his spear and took off running while the chipmunk-like creatures chased him relentlessly. As they moved, those foolish monsters crashed into numerous nearly invisible threads strung in midair, causing Lady Lily's traps to activate instantly. At that very moment, as soon as the thread snapped, the walls on both sides of the forest echoed with the sharp whistling sound of spikes being launched. Before the ravenous beasts could react, their bodies were riddled with holes as if they were honeycombs. Seeing their miserable state, Dane paused for a beat, uncertain whether to feel relieved or pitiful. He thought, chuckling to himself, that they had fallen into the trap and he had taken them down without lifting a finger. Only then did he realize that one particularly fortunate chipmunk had survived the storm of spikes and was now racing toward him with a desperate fury to launch one final attack. However, although slightly surprised that the chipmunk-like monster had survived, Dane quickly dodged to the side, evading its attack with swift reflexes. He muttered inwardly that it was too fast, feeling a hint of admiration mixed with frustration. The creature, realizing its strike had missed, immediately dug its claws into the ground to halt its momentum. At the same time, it opened its mouth wide and expelled a dark crimson mist that seemed to pulse with an ominous glow. Though Dane had no idea what it was, instinct alone told him it was highly dangerous. He reminded himself that whatever it spat out couldn't be good, staying vigilant as he twirled his spear rapidly in his hands like a fan blade, dispersing the reddish mist into the air around him. Yet being held up by such a lowly creature only fueled his irritation. He thought, feeling a surge of impatience building within as the looming threat of failure in his mother's assigned task weighed heavily on him, that he couldn't afford to waste more time there. With no better choice, Dane launched himself forward, ready to end this nuisance once and for all. At the same moment, the monstrous chipmunk lunged toward him with equal ferocity, its ravenous gaze fixed firmly on his neck. Both combatants raced headlong into each other, and in a flash of movement the air was filled with the sharp whistling sound of slicing force. Moments later, Dane's spear cleaved the creature in two with surgical precision. But even after splitting it apart, his irritation remained, and in a fit of lingering annoyance, he swung his spear backward, once more severing its head cleanly in half as if to ensure it wouldn't bother him any longer. Time passed quickly as the sun dipped lower on the horizon, casting long shadows over the forest floor. Finally, with a gasp of relief, Dane stumbled out of the treacherous woods, collapsing onto the ground with the exhausted groan of a man who had just run for his life. He muttered between labored breaths that he was going to throw up, feeling like his lungs were on fire, but added with a weary grin briefly flickering across his face that at least he had made it out safely. But as if fate itself enjoyed toying with him, a new sound shattered his moment of respite. His ears twitched as ominous noises echoed from nearby, and despite feeling utterly drained, Dane forced himself upright, his entire body tensing with readiness. He cursed inwardly, his teeth clenched in frustration, gripping his spear tightly as he prepared for whatever might come next, wondering what it was now and when he had let his guard down. However, the person who had just arrived turned out to be none other than Lady Lily herself. She praised him with a gentle smile, saying that his total time was 3 minutes and 30 seconds, and he was even faster than she was. Seeing her appear so suddenly, Dane blinked in surprise and asked if she had been watching him the whole time. Lily replied with a soft chuckle that of course she couldn't possibly let him go alone, even though she knew his talent better than anyone, because a mother's heart was a different matter. She said he had done well, and she couldn't find a single mistake, then asked if he was hurt anywhere, gently ruffling his hair with motherly affection as she spoke. Honestly, Lily sighed with mock exasperation. He would be recruited as an assassin before long. Her words made Dane grin awkwardly, scratching his head sheepishly. Then with a graceful motion, Lily reached into her sleeve and withdrew a dagger. Its black blade shimmered with an ominous sheen, a weapon steeped in history. It was the very same dagger used in Dane's 1-year-old ceremonial weapon selection. She held it out toward him, saying in a warm yet firm tone to take it as it suited him far better than it did her now. Dane's eyes widened in astonishment as he gazed at the familiar weapon, its dark aura sparking a flood of memories. He stammered, almost disbelieving, asking if this was Nighthorn, her dagger, and if he could really have it. Lily nodded serenely, saying of course she no longer needed it. She explained that Nighthorn was forged from the mystical or ethereal metal that absorbed the elements of all things, and if he wished it could even store every poison known to the world. Her voice tinged with pride. Yet she didn't need to say much more. Dane already knew the dagger's properties by heart. He mused that it could absorb toxins and wield them as a weapon, feeling its deadly potential almost pulse in his hands. Without hesitation, he accepted the dagger, eagerly thanking his mother and promising to treasure it, gripping it tightly as though holding a piece of his very soul. Seeing him accept the gift wholeheartedly, Lady Lily couldn't help but feel a surge of joy within her chest. She suggested they head back and rest, saying with a warm smile, "Thank you, Dane. so he thought to himself quietly this was everything his mother wanted to teach him. However, just as they were about to turn back, a sudden piercing scream echoed from deep within the forest. The cry was so sharp that birds from nearby trees took to the sky in a frantic flurry of wings. Hearing this, both Dane and Lily froze in place. Dane asked his mother if she had heard that, his brows furrowing. Lily nodded, her expression turning serious, saying it sounded like someone was in trouble. She urged Dane to hurry, and he replied without hesitation, and together they raced toward the source of the distressing sound. Time passed swiftly, and the scene shifted to a secondary tower belonging to the Sogres family. Inside one of its dimly lit rooms, an elderly man with a long white beard suddenly bolted upright from his slumber, his face drenched in terror as though he had just escaped from a nightmare. His eyes darted frantically around the room, disoriented and breathless. He muttered, his voice trembling, asking where he was and remembering eating mushrooms in the forest. Hearing the old man's hoarse voice, Dane entered the room carrying a cup of steaming tea. He said calmly, placing the cup down, that the detoxification process was still ongoing, and asked the old man not to move too much. The old man squinted at Dane with a look of curiosity and asked about the detoxification, inquiring if Dane was the one who had saved him. Dane replied plainly that yes, he had, and that the old man had eaten a red-nosed mushroom, but fortunately they had found him just in time. The mention of the deadly mushroom drained the color from the man's face, turning his already pale features ghastly white. He whispered, dread lacing every word, a red nose. In response, Dane handed him the cup and confirmed, saying it was highly poisonous, and had they been any later he would have been nothing more than a corpse by now, before telling him to drink some water. The man thanked him weakly, his hands trembling as he accepted the cup and drank deeply, tilting his head back until the last drop was gone. As the man gulped down the liquid, Dane's keen eyes scanned him thoughtfully, observing the emblem on his belt and realizing it belonged to the Nixian magic tower. A flicker of realization sparked in his mind that this man wasn't just anyone. He thought that without Nighthorn there was no way he could have saved him. After drinking the water, the old man turned to ask again where he was. Dane shrugged as he replied that he was in the secondary tower of the Sogres family. Since the Sogres family was so well known, the old man quickly deduced where he was. However, upon realizing this, he felt a wave of frustration wash over him, thinking that not only had he gotten lost heading south, but he had also eaten a poisonous mushroom and ended up here. Noticing the old man seemed to be recovering a little, Dane continued asking him to please rest for now, and informing him that he had told his father who would be there soon. The old man's curiosity was piqued, and he asked about Dane's father. Dane nodded, confirming that he was the youngest son of Count Sogres, Dane Sogres. At this revelation, the old man's eyes widened in recognition, and he stroked his beard thoughtfully, realizing Dane was the younger brother of Arabella, the genius whom all the magic towers had their eyes on. He then asked how Dane had found him. Dane didn't seem bothered by the question and said nonchalantly that he had actually been training with his mother in the forest. The old man exclaimed in shock, "The crazy forest?" Before recalling the dreadful memories of his own time in that forest, admitting that even he, an 8th level mage, had gotten lost in there, where the mana flow had reversed while he was casting a spell causing him to collapse. He realized that was what had happened to him. The old man looked at Dane with a hint of disbelief and asked if that was true, saying that forest had ancient energy and there were traps everywhere. Dane confirmed that the forest was their family's inheritance and was extremely dangerous for outsiders. Moreover, because the energy there was different from modern magic's mana, it was best for mages to avoid it. Dane also explained that the old man had ended up in danger after eating a poisonous mushroom. The old man said he understood as realization dawned, acknowledging that he had nearly died there and sighing. But then a more pressing thought crossed his mind, and he asked without thinking if that meant this boy was strong enough to train in that forest and if he had also made the antidote. Dane confirmed that he had. The old man was even more shocked, thinking the boy looked so young, barely in his teens, yet he had the knowledge and skill to concoct an antidote that required such expertise. He chuckled, amazed, wondering how a family like this could exist with not only 2 genius daughters but even the youngest son. He paused, shaking his head in amazement, and mused that if it were still wartime, the Sogres family could become the most powerful family in the Althean Empire. That's a wrap. The story continues in my next video. Like and subscribe to stay notified.